All right, hello everyone. We are back, and we are looking at world systems theory, about which I know practically nothing, except that the founder, Manuel Wallerstein, died in 2019, and this was a theory that was meant to combat theories of, I guess, linear cultural progress, describing the economic and political state of different communities by reference to their position in a world system, whether they're in the center or the periphery or something along those lines. So we're going to go through that and we're going to get a better understanding of it by the end of tonight. We'll see how far we want to drag it on. I'm going to look actually at a text by Wallerstein, which purports to be an introduction to world systems theory. My understanding is that he wanted it to be his preference was to refer to it as world systems analysis. So it's not, I take from that at least, it's not meant to be like a comprehensive theory of how the world works as such. It's a specific mode of analysis or a level of analysis. So this is the text we'll be looking at in a little bit. I might look at some introductory videos first, because that's usually a faster way to go about it. But the very bland looking cover here, as you can see, which I like. I like when books have sort of a serious look to them. I see if the top's a bit trimmed off there. What's going on? Let's fix that. That's better. Let's go with, yeah, I like that. All right. Let's just a cursory look at what we've got going on here in the table of contents. Understanding the world in which we live, historical origins of world systems analysis, from social science disciplines to historical social sciences, the modern world system is a capitalist world economy. Right. The rise of the state system. Now, this one I'm going to be very interested in. Sovereign nation states, colonies, and interesting. I think we might even jump to this. So here's what I think we're going to do. We're going to watch one or two introductory videos on world systems analysis. And then I want to see Wallerstein's account of the rise of the state system, because that's going to be very interesting specifically to me. This is a short book. I'll probably go through this on my own time anyways. I probably want a hard copy of this, actually. I might order one. But, yeah, so this will be interesting. Hi, serious. So world systems theory is where unequal exchange theory comes from. One of the big things I have against the YouTube sock dems is they love to quote-unquote, well, actually world systems theory. Okay, gotcha. All right, well, let's pop this aside for now, and I have something lined up already. So this promises to be a fairly level-headed or a fairly clear exposition of what world systems theory is. You can tell by you can just tell by the way this looks here. So we'll go through this, and then I'm going to take a look at the text by Wallerstein himself, and then afterwards I have a talk by Wallerstein lined up, China and the world system since 1945, and I think that'll fill up the hour pretty well. And then we'll see what happens.
Hello everyone and welcome to the video on world systems theory. So what we're going to do is look at an overview of world systems theory, what it is, what it tries to explain, and then run through a timeline of world systems in general, and then we're going to end with a look at some of the more common critiques of world systems theory. So what we want to understand in particular when going through this is understanding the central question of why do we call poor countries developing and rich countries developed. So this is very common when it comes to trying to distinguish between poor and rich countries, the terms developing countries, developing nations, as well as the developed world are extremely common. They're used by NGOs, by governments, by supernatural organizations like the UN and others. However, they do come with a certain set of encoded values as well, and a particular way of looking at the world. So the biggest critique of using these terms really is that it presupposes kind of a linear progression from underdeveloped, developing, and then developed countries. That somehow countries which are developing or underdeveloped are somehow not quite as advanced as developed countries, and this is a linear pathway. That countries, as they progress through various processes, will become developing, and then after further progression will become developed. World systems theory is very much a critique of this way of looking at the development of countries, and proposes a fairly radical counter narrative of sorts. So it's very closely associated with Immanuel Wallerstein, an American sociologist. He is a sociologist, or rather, he was a sociologist, although world systems theory, often also known as world systems analysis, is not a single discipline theory. It's a multidisciplinary theory influenced by a range of different academic disciplines. His preference is to call it world systems analysis rather than world systems theory, although theory has stuck. And it combines politics, society, and economic thinking to arrive at a very different way of understanding the world. So rather than dividing the world into this kind of linear timeline of underdeveloped, developing, and developed nations, Wallerstein divides the world into three distinct areas: core nations, semi-periphery, and periphery nations. However, these relate to their economic function within a single global economy or a single world system. So this is a very different way of looking at things.
Of course I'm muted. Why wouldn't I be? It's a President Sunday stream. I have to be. Um. So. Okay. It's a little strange that you would be using language like core, semi-periphery, and periphery to refer to your place in like a global structure, right? Good God. It's okay. I'll edit out that sequence afterwards, and nobody will ever know.
Because this doesn't presuppose that there's some kind of linear progression, but rather core countries and, let's say, periphery countries are just as modern as each other. They're different not because one is more advanced, but rather because they play different economic roles. They have different economic functions. So this is very much a critique of the current or the common way of thinking that economic development is a national characteristic. So nations and countries have their own economic development. This is an understanding that economic development occurs within a single global system. So because a country has a particular set of economic characteristics, this is because of the role it plays within a single globalized system, and not because...
Why is periphery, semi-periphery, and core strange? Well, because these represent proximity to a center But when you're talking about a global system, you see sort of the issue. Now, if we're talking about something like a relationship of kind of emanations, of like a center of decision making, say, and then areas that don't take part in decision making or stuff like that, that sort of makes sense. It's just when you think of core, semi-periphery, and periphery, that sort of brings to mind like the relationship between the colony and the metropole, which I think is what's sort of being evoked here. But that works because the metropole is over here, and the colony is over here, and the colony is sort of an emanation from the metropole. But in a global system, that's not really the case. These are all just nodes in a complete thing, right? If that makes sense. It's probably not an important point at all. It's just the language is a little bit strange given what it's attempting to do.
Because of just individual economic decisions that have taken place within that country, or
Not really. The point is that they serve a different function. The core countries are sustained by the periphery countries through unequal bargaining power. Yeah, fair enough. So it's peripheral in terms of, well, I guess in terms of what is benefited by the world system. So peripheral countries are sort of exploited resources of a kind, and core ones are not. They're all nodes, but the nodes lead back to specific places. Yeah, yeah. No, I got that. It's just the language is strange.
the governance of the economy of that single country. It recognizes how interconnected the global economy is, and therefore recognizes that
Like, what's strange is that the categories have uh, they evoke a spatial image, but you don't need one. Like you could literally just describe their economic function as opposed to using this gradation of core, semi-periphery, and periphery. Maybe that'll become more clear as why they do this as we move forward. But
we cannot understand how a single economy functions without looking at its role and its function within the global economy. It's worth pointing out here that this is a neo-Marxist analysis, so it's very much a radical way of trying to understand the world within the Marxist tradition. Is not a traditional Marxist theory, but it does take this traditional way of understanding the means of production and ownership of the means of production to the global level, rather than just the national or local level. So if we look at the map here, so this is a map of one way of understanding the division of countries between the core, semi-periphery, and periphery. There is an understanding that countries can and sometimes do move from one category to the other as their role in the global economic system changes. But again, it's not that one country is less developed than the other, but rather the actual functions they play. So we see the core countries are by and large Western Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and so on. And many countries would have many maps of this sort, would also put South Korea and other similar countries there. So what we would understand as the global north, whereas the periphery countries are largely in Africa, parts of Asia, particularly the Middle East, and also parts of Latin America. Whereas the semi-peripheries would be the countries that we would often call the BRICS nations, so Russia, China, India, Brazil, as well as the Mint nations, Nigeria, Turkey, and so on. So if we go on to actually take a look at what the economic functions of these three different categories are, so core states, so what we would understand to be the global north or the developed world, are highly industrialized. They often produce manufactured goods, specialize in information, finance, and service industries, particularly those with global reach, are generally technologically advanced, politically stable, strong public infrastructure, and are economically diversified. So they will have a variety of industries and are involved in a variety of different economic globalized processes.
Don't some of these seem a little bit superfluous? Like if the purpose of this is to describe the role in the global system, why are we concerned with political stability? You know? Or with technological advancement? I mean, these might be common features as we see them today, but this doesn't seem like something that would be part of a definition.
This isn't to say that these are processes which are primarily domestic. They are primarily international. So despite specializing in, say, manufacturing manufactured goods, uh, doesn't mean that the raw materials will be domestic. The raw materials will be taken from other countries with other economic functions. Um, Specializing in information and finance, again, there may be other countries involved in the supply chain. The economic diversification again relates to globalized economic processes rather than just strictly domestic economic processes. So if we move on to the periphery states, so we're jumping down to the lowest level. So periphery states are weakly industrialized. So again, this is large parts of Africa, Asia, and South America. Weakly industrialized, so usually not diversified, but rather dependent upon a single industry or the export of a small range of raw materials. The
Yeah, this presentation seems a little bit confused. Some of these things make sense. So, for example, technology base is controlled by foreign companies or powers. See, this seems like it would be a relevant part of a description of a periphery state, as I understand it. Frequently politically unstable with poor public economic infrastructure, that just seems to be a description of a troubled state, you know? It doesn't seem like this is, like, just the word frequently by itself means this cannot be part of a definition. Because sometimes it's not politically unstable. In fact, even that language is a bit strange. What do you mean frequently politically unstable? Is it unstable or not? If it's stable, that is to say it's not politically unstable, then what does it mean for it to be frequently politically unstable? Oh, it's a perfectly stable place, but it's frequently unstable. Or it's politically unstable, but it's frequently stable. It doesn't make any sense, you know? Economically dependent on single or few income streams. That may be like a consequence of its position, but I feel like the definitions of these different categories would have to be really modest to be appropriate. Let's actually pull up the book. I'm not super satisfied with the presentation as given. No offense meant to the presenter. Let's just take a look at this thing. Here, I'll make myself smaller. Here we go. So let's look at the rise of the state system. That'll tell us a little bit, I think. Okay, we're going to see some red flags here. I'm almost certain of it. But let's see how this goes. The rise of the state system, sovereign nation states, colonies, and the interstate system. I wonder if Monkey is engaged with this. She's a Marxist. I'd be surprised if she hasn't. No reference. Shame, that would have been interesting. Okay. The modern state is a sovereign state. Sovereignty is a concept that was invented in the modern world system. Okay. Its prima facie meaning is totally autonomous state power, but modern states in fact exist within a larger circle of states, what we have come to call the interstate system, so we shall have to investigate the degree and the content of this presumed autonomy. The historians talk, all of them apparently, talk of the emergence of the new monarchies in England. In England, France, and Spain at the end of the 15th century, at just the moment of onset of the modern world system. As for the interstate system, its ancestry is usually attributed to the development of Renaissance diplomacy on the Italian peninsula, and its institutionalization is usually thought to be the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. Westphalia, signed by most of the states of Europe, codified certain rules of interstate relations that set limits to, as well as guarantees of relative autonomy. These rules were elaborated and expanded later under the rubric of international law. Okay. This almost gave me an aneurysm. The new monarchies were centralizing structures. That is, they sought to ensure that regional power structures were effectively subordinated to the overall authority of the monarch. And they sought to ensure this by creating a civil and military bureaucracy. Most crucially, they sought to give themselves strength by securing some significant taxing powers with enough personnel to actually to collect the taxes. In the 17th century, the rulers of these new monarchies declared themselves absolute monarchs. This seems to suggest that they had unlimited power. In actual fact, they lacked not only unlimited power. Let's see, is that... Oh, that's no good. Hang on. Let me, There we go, that's better. Can I get rid of this side thing here? Oh, I guess not. That's fine. Sorry. They lacked not only unlimited power, but very much power at all. Absolute monarchs merely claimed the right to have unlimited power, or rather, they claimed the right to have unlimited power. The term absolute comes from the Latin absolutus, which meant not that the monarch is all-powerful, but that the monarch is not subject to, i.e. is absolved from, the laws, and therefore cannot be legitimately constrained by any human from doing what the ruler thinks best. This allowed for arbitrary power, but it didn't mean that the monarch had effective power, which is, as we have said, relatively low. To be sure, the states sought, through the centuries, to overcome this lack of real power, and they had a certain amount of success in achieving this. Consequently, one of the secular trends of the modern world system from its beginning, at least until about the 1970s, as we shall see, was a slow, steady increase in real state power. If we compare the real power, ability to get decisions actually carried out, of Louis XIV of France, who reigned from 1661 to 1715, usually taken as the arch symbol of absolute power, with, say, the Prime Minister of Sweden in the year 2000, we will see that the latter had more real power in Sweden in 2000 than Louis in France in 1715. Excuse me. Alright. The major tool the monarchs used to increase their effective power was the construction of bureaucracies. That's a strange account of bureaucracy. And since they at first did not have the tax revenues with which to pay for bureaucracies, they found a solution in the sale of offices, which gave the monarchs an increase in both bureaucrats and revenue, and therefore some additional power, albeit less than if they had been able to recruit bureaucrats directly, as they would at later times. Once the rulers had a minimal bureaucracy in place, they sought to use it to give the states control over all sorts of political functions: tax collection, the courts, legislation, and enforcement agencies, police and army. At the same time, they sought to eliminate or at least limit the autonomous authority of local notables in all these fields. They also sought to create an informational network to make sure that their intentions were respected. The French elaborated the institution of prefects, persons who represented the central state and were resident in the various parts of the country, and this institution was emulated in various ways by almost all modern states. Sovereignty was a claim of authority not only internally, but externally. That is, vis-a-vis other states. It was first of all a claim of fixed boundaries within which a given state was sovereign, and therefore within which no other state had the right to assert any kind of authority: executive, legislative, judicial, or military. The timeline on this seems wonky. Like, that's... Can you go over what's giving you an aneurysm for us laypersons? There's some anachronism going on here. Among other things, I just hate whenever people bring up the Peace of Westphalia. It's a big black box that nobody understands. Um, when he says sovereignty is a concept that was invented in the modern world system, that's preposterous. It's actually preposterous. Um, the idea that monarchs tried to increase their effective power through the construction of bureaucracies, but they lack the revenue to pay for like it's this seems kind of backwards. Like bureaucracies sort of emerge organically. Nobody goes, boy, I really want a bureaucracy here, right? It's the result of the expansion of offices and the rationalization of administration. It's not like the gradual rationalization of administration. It's not like I like you feel like you're planting geraniums in your garden one day. I feel like I'm gonna go to the store and buy some geranium seeds. I'm gonna plant a bureaucracy. That's not how that works. By the way, is your copy pictures or is it text? I don't know. I'm assuming picture because it does this when I try to select things. Don't worry about it. I'm not downloading another copy of the text right now. So this is interesting here. Sovereignty was a claim of authority not only internally but externally, that is vis-a-vis other states. This is a point that starts to come to the fore in late modernity, but it really only has an internalistic importance until then. Among other things, it was generally assumed that movement was relatively free between states. There wasn't as much of an emphasis placed upon territorial borders as such, because the border as such didn't serve the same function that it does now as a demographic filter. To be sure, these claims the states that other states should not quote unquote interfere in their domestic affairs, have always been more honored in the breach than sedulously observed, but the mere claim has nonetheless served to constrain the degree of interference. Nor have borders been unchanging. Border claims between states have been constant and recurrent. Nonetheless, at any given moment, there almost always exist de facto realities about the borders within which sovereignty is exercised. There is one further fundamental feature of sovereignty. It is a claim, and claims have little meaning unless they are recognized by others. Others may not respect the claims, but that is in many ways less important than that they recognize them formally, which is respect, right? Sovereignty is more than anything else a matter of legitimacy, and in the modern world system, the legitimacy of sovereignty requires reciprocal recognition. Sovereignty is a hypothetical trade in which two potentially or really conflicting sides, respecting de facto realities of power, exchange such recognitions as their least costly strategy. Reciprocal recognition is a fundament of the interstate system. There have often been entities that have proclaimed their existence as sovereign states, but failed to receive the recognition of most other states. I'm not digging this. Sorry, I'm zipping around a little bit here. Okay. The relationship of states to firms is a key to understanding the functioning of the capitalist world economy. The official ideology of most capitalists is laissez-faire, the doctrine that governments should not interfere with the working of entrepreneurs in the market. It is important to understand that as a general rule, entrepreneurs assert this ideology loudly but do not really want it to be implemented, or at least not fully, and certainly do not usually act as though they believed it was sound doctrine. Let us start with boundaries. A sovereign state has, in theory, the right to decide what may cross its boundaries and under what conditions. Um, I don't think that's actually true. See, sovereign right is an internalist concept. You don't have rights in a state of nature, yeah? I mean, you do have rights in the sort of Hobbesian sense of, in the absence of an impediment to a thing, you technically have a right to it because nothing's there to tell you you don't. But but the corollary of that is everything else has a right to you. So in international relations, say, you're effectively in a state of nature because there is no higher power to tell you what you can and can't do, like to limit your rights and then to enforce that limitation. So it's not just mere speech. Um, Without the borders of a state, outside the borders of a state, there's no right to not be invaded, and there's nothing peculiar about the right to decide what crosses your borders just because they're yours. Everybody has an equal right in that sense. You have a right to determine what is admitted in by the state apparatus as the sovereign, as whoever bears the decision. But externally, I don't think that's true. A sovereign state has in theory the right to decide what may cross its boundaries and under what conditions. I don't think that's true at all. The stronger the state, the larger its bureaucratic machinery, and therefore the greater its ability to enforce decisions concerning transboundary transactions. There are three principal kinds of transboundary transactions: the movement of goods, of capital, and of persons. Sellers wish for their goods to traverse boundaries without interference and without taxation. On the other hand, competing sellers within the boundaries being entered may very much want the state to interfere by imposing quotas or tariffs, or by giving subsidies to their own products. Any decision that the state takes favors one entrepreneur or the other. There does not exist a neutral position. The same is true of capital flows. There's also this strange tendency to talk about the state as a decision-making entity, and it's not. The sovereign bears a decision-making power, but the state doesn't. The state is that's not what the state is. Like the state isn't identical with sovereignty. It requires sovereignty to be a state, but it's not identical with sovereignty. The explanation how the bureaucracy and so forth were developed seems a little bit as filler and as a golden thread which you can follow more than a real explanation. That's kind of what I'm getting from this, including again like the reference to Westphalia. This account is very I don't want to use the word cliche. Let's look at the where are we? Page 46. Let's look at the index. I just want to see, or the bibliography. I want to see what he references here. Critiques of world systems analysis. Well, world systems analysis is relatively recent. Okay. Forerunners. Weber and Smith. Let's see if he references Weber. curious if he, page 24, twice he references Weber on page 24 and page 105. Here we go. Oh, that's unfortunate. The basic institutions of the capitalist world economy are the market or markets, the firms that compete in the markets, the multiple states within an interstate system, the households, the classes, and the status groups, to use Weber's term, which some people in recent years have renamed the identities. Okay, so that's meaningless. 105. Oh, 105's after, that must be in the notes? Oh no. Oh, I think I know what this is going to be. No, it's just the bibliographical guide, so there's no... Okay, well, he has a glossary. Let's look at that. What is a state in his glossary? In the modern world system, a state is a bounded territory claiming sovereignty and domain over its subjects, now called citizens. Today, all land areas of the world except the Antarctic fall within the boundaries of some state, and no land area falls within the bounds of more than one state, although boundaries are sometimes disputed. A state claims the legal monopoly over the use of weapons within its territory. What the What? No, it doesn't. A state claims a legal monopoly over the use of weapons within its territory, subject to the laws of this. What the hell's he talking about? No. Wrong. Bad, Wallerstein. No state claims a legal monopoly over the use of weapons. That doesn't even mean anything. Literally anything can be a weapon. Oh no, man. This is not like this is not the doom of the theory, but this is not great. So I'm gonna do something on this soon because this is actually driving me crazy. This is one of the reasons why I recommend Redhika Mongia, by the way, because she pushes back hard against this kind of thing. Just the naive use of Max Weber's definition as if it was simply like a common sense thing you could just deploy, and not even with any particularity. So again, this is like Ayn Rand level. A state claims the legal monopoly over the use of weapons. Actually, I'll pull that up too, because that's a great example of this. I talk about this in my Politics of Bioshock video. This is the Vocation Lectures of Max Weber, which I highly recommend everybody read. Literally, right at the beginning. Page, well, I mean, technically page 33 of this volume, but page 2 of the lecture. In the past, the use of physical violence by widely differing organizations, starting with the Klan, was completely normal. Nowadays, in contrast, we must say, and this is crucial, nowadays, in contrast, we must say that the state is the form of human community that successfully lays claim to the monopoly of legitimate physical violence within a particular territory, and this idea of territory is an essential defining feature. For what is specific to the present is that, again, pay attention to this language, because this is actually really important. It's not just the fact of the monopoly. This part here, particular to the present, is critical. For what is specific to the present is that all other organizations or individuals can assert the right to use physical violence only insofar as the state permits them to do so. The state is regarded as the sole source of the right to use violence. Not the sole source of violence, the sole source of the right to use violence. Hence what hence what politics means for us is to strive for a share of power or to influence the distribution of power, whether between states or between the groups of people contained within a state. That's what Weber's saying. It's a much more modest point that he's making. He's talking about what is the inevitable consequence of our discourse of the state? What does it actually mean when we refer to the state today? He's not simply saying that, well, just define our terms so we can just talk about this unproblematically. A state is that thing that has X, Y, and Z qualities. No, he's diagnosing. His definition of the state is a part of his diagnosis of the condition of political discourse and of our understanding and of the how politics functions in the modern world. This, by contrast, is sort of taking the form of that definition and just not treating it with any care at all. It's just this is just what a state is, guys. Like the legal monopoly over the use of weapons, that's ridiculous. You can have illegitimate laws, for example. The use of weapons doesn't necessarily mean the use of violence or of legitimate violence. It completely misses the point. That language of legitimate physical violence, that legitimate part, that is talking about the perception of what the state is. Who's the woman author you recommended a second ago? Didn't quite catch the name. That would be Radhika Mongia, who wrote a very good book called Indian Migration and Empire, A Colonial Genealogy of the Modern State. It really should have been called A Colonial Genealogy of the Modern State, simply because that would sell what the actual contents of the book are. But for whatever reason, Indian Migration and Empire. It's not an area studies text. This is one of the most important global histories of the state that you will find. And just by dint of its title, almost everybody misses it, which is unfortunate because this is groundbreaking. And one of the best critiques of methodological nationalism you will find. All right. As another point of comparison, this is Ayn Rand's The Virtue of Selfishness. The nature of government. A government is an institution that holds the exclusive power to enforce certain rules of social conduct in a given geographical area. Weber has been so misused, it's insane. Isn't the whole legitimate part also doing some heavy lifting here? Doesn't the state define its own legitimacy? Not exactly, because we define the state as that which bears legitimacy, right? Or more accurately, when we talk about violence belonging to the state, it has a different quality to it. It now starts to bear things like necessity and it becomes sort of infected with notions of like the consent of the governed or things like that. See what he does with sovereignty. Sovereignty, a concept in international law. That's not good. That first received wide usage in the 16th century. It refers to the right of a state to control all activities within its borders. That is, sovereignty is a denial of both the right of subregions to defy the central state and the right of any other state to interfere in the internal workings of the sovereign state. Originally, the sovereign was a monarch or chief of state acting by himself. After the French Revolution, it became more and more the people. That's wrong. Sovereignty as a notion goes back to Bodin. And specifically what it refers to is not the right of a state to control all activities within its borders. It refers to, I mean, in Schmittian terms, it's who gets to decide on the normal situation, but really what it refers to ultimately is what bears as a function of its relationship to the different parts of the society taken as a whole. what bears the right to ultimately make choices and to enact rules. Um, if we're talking about, like, by the time you get to Hobbes, sovereignty is that which ultimately bears the right of the it's what bears the deferred rights, or I guess the relinquished rights of the members of the social compact. You know, because the social contract is the giving up of your natural rights to one another, but you're not simply giving them to one another in the sense that, okay, you kill me, but I get to kill you. That's the state of nature all over again. It's you're referring them to a third party who now holds you, who no longer have the right to do this, to your end of the bargain. You said the sovereign and the state are not the same, but can they be the same? No, because territory can't really bear sovereignty. Territory is a description of the limits of sovereignty internalistically. Um, like sovereignty is a condition of having a state, but it's not identical to the state because you can have parts of the state, none of which by themselves bear sovereignty. Okay. I want to look at this bibliography again. What do we have here? Writings by world systems analysts. I haven't heard of any of these people except Taylor. Peter Taylor I've heard of. This is frustrating. So his account of the state is not good. Okay, so the territory is part of the state. The territory is part of the state in the event that you have a situation where you have multiple states or multiple sovereigns sort of adjacent to one another. So the territorial lines, at least formally, denote where the decision-making power of one sovereign ends. So in an international system, the territory would be a part of the state, insofar as it functions as a kind of the border functions as a kind of skin, right? States become aware of each other by reference to their borders. But like you can imagine a situation in which you still have the identical social form, just without adjacent states, in which case the territory wouldn't particularly matter as much. You know, like you can still have sovereign power, or sovereign authority rather, um, but the mountains could be very high and the emperor could be far away. Skin's a very interesting organ. gives you the very powerful illusion of there being a significant distinction between your inside and your outside. It's true that this account isn't great, but it also doesn't do world system analysis. Newton's account of gravity was totally wrong, but Newtonian physics. I mean, it's not a bad. Yeah. The problem is what he construes the world system as being. If he construes it as a system of states, and if you understand states in this way, it gets you into some problematic territory. Like the categorization scheme economically is not necessarily bad. It's just the thing that he's trying to apply it to is probably ill thought out. People need to actually read Weber and not just use him uncritically. Weber did not just write the Bible for political science. You can't just take the definition of the state given in politics as a vocation and just assume that it's unproblematic. He's talking about it specifically because it's problematic. Let's see what, I'll go over that in more depth later. Let's see what, Wallerstein himself is like. China and the World System since 1945 by Emanuel Wallerstein. This was given at Yale. Actually, I think this is the same lecture hall that the Yale class in political science that you can find on YouTube is given at. Here we go.
We're very happy to have Emanuel Wallerstein here to tell us about China, Africa, and the world system since 1945.
What?
In case you move.
Yeah. Oh,
There.
thank you. Okay. The
Oh God, that's loud.
conference that's going on today and tomorrow here at Yale has the title Making Sense of the China-Africa Relationship. It's a very good title because what we have to do is to make sense of something. But the question immediately becomes, how does one make sense of something, of anything, not just the China-Africa relationship? And the answer is, well, we all tell ourselves stories. And depending on what story we tell or believe in, we come out with very different ways of making sense of what's going on in a particular phenomenon. Some people think they don't tell stories, but they are either hiding it or denying it, but it's irrelevant. They have a story. It informs how they look at things. So I'm going to tell you my story, my narrative of the world system since 1945. Could tell it to you since 1500, but I don't have time to do that. And it's not as relevant to this particular question. So what's happened in the world system since 1945? I'm going to tell you two stories. One has to do with the flourishing of U.S. hegemony and its steady, irreversible decline. That's one story. And the second is something I call the structural crisis of the world system. That is, all systems, whether we're talking of the universe as a whole or the tiniest nano system, have lives. They come into existence at some point, They live a normal life, whatever that means, according to rules that they've established, and then they move too far from equilibrium, and they have a structural crisis, which they have to live through, determining what successor system or systems will come into existence. I am also going to argue to you that we are in that kind of structural crisis for the modern world system, which is a capitalist world economy. Now, let me talk about 1945. 1945, of course, is the end of the Second World War, right? It is, in my opinion, and I'm not going to elaborate, the end of a 30 years war between Germany and the United States to become the hegemonic power. And of course, the U.S. wins that completely in 1945. It's a total defeat of Germany. Now, what does the world look like in 1945? First of all, the Second World War was an extremely destructive war of existing industry everywhere. Everywhere in the world, from Great Britain and France at the western end to Japan at the eastern end and passing through everything in between, it all was massively destroyed. The only country to emerge unscathed in terms of physical plant was the United States. Okay? Now, the United States had also been building up its efficiency as a producer for a long, long time, and they were at their height. So we were both, the United States was both the only one with the machinery to produce things, and it was super efficient in what it was. In addition, the dollar had become de facto the reserve currency of the world system. And out of that, of course, U.S. firms could build monopolies, which is the only way you can make serious money within the capitalist system. These monopolies were guaranteed by the U.S. state, but they were also guaranteed by the fact that nobody else could seriously compete with them. And out of that, the U.S. could build a political dominance and a cultural dominance which enabled it to be the hegemonic power. Now let me just tell you what the words hegemonic power means. It means you set the rules by which everyone else has to act, and you get your way 95% of the time in 95% of the cases. That's very difficult, very rare. Hegemony doesn't last long, but that's what hegemony means. Hegemony doesn't simply mean you're the strongest or a strong power. You can call that a strong power, but don't call it hegemony. Now, the U.S. had a single problem at that time, only one. The problem was the Soviet Union, another country, had an extremely strong military. Okay? And it was complicated in addition by the fact that the U.S., for internal political reasons, was reducing the size of its armed forces. It had, however, the nuclear weapons.
What?
What the U.S. did in order to guarantee its hegemony.
When was the U.S. reducing the size of its armed forces? Since they had nuclear weapons. Can anybody make sense of that? Is that referring to something specific? That's just wrong, isn't it? I don't know. I don't think we're gonna get much out of this. Oh, frustrating. Frustrating, frustrating, frustrating. Let's watch this one. World Systems Theory by the Lane Report.
Welcome back to the Lane Report. In this presentation, we discuss how the world systems theory helps to explain the development of corporate fascism on a global scale. Not all geopolitical theories were used by Western countries to rationalize foreign dominance. One in particular, the world systems theory, attempted to explain the reasons behind this dominance. Developed by Emanuel Wallerstein in 1974 with the publication of his paper titled The Rise and Future Demise of
The U.S. military had a huge budget cut after the USSR dissolved. Yeah, but that was in the 90s. He's not talking about the 90s. Is he? Was he? I don't know.
the world capitalist system, concepts for comparative analysis. This thesis critically evaluated the contemporary world economic system with a particular focus on the impact of U.S. and European foreign policy in Africa. At the time, Wallerstein was a professor of sociology at McGill University and focused specifically on critical theory as an explanation of global political and economic relationships. He spent his early career as an expert on post-colonial African affairs, where he became interested in the writings of Raoul Prebisch.
He seems to be just a victim of American political science. Like this approach to, I guess, political science generally in American universities after, I think, roughly like late 20th century, early 21st century. Sorry, late early 20th century, late 19th century. That's pretty ubiquitous. You don't see that kind of thing in German political science. German political science is actually very robust. American political science largely just bastardizes terminology and schematics from German political science, and just tries to build systems off of essentialized lingo. It does more than that, but like from my vantage, that's the most ubiquitous feature. Yeah, he was talking about the end of World War II. He wasn't talking about the dissolution of the USSR. Also, the US military having a huge budget cut doesn't mean the downsizing of its military, right? Those two aren't identical.
From the Structuralist School, and Andre Gunder Frank from the Dependency Theory branch of Structuralism. Wallerstein designed the world systems theory based on the writings of these early scholars, arguing that core countries use financial and political tools to exploit resources and cheap labor from periphery countries. Both the Structuralist School and Dependency Theory argued that developed countries use military, finance, and foreign policy to keep the former colonial world dependent. While Wallerstein's theory did not deviate from this premise, he provided clarification on the nature of the relationship. To Wallerstein, there were no independent national economies. The world was connected by a world capitalist system where core countries exploited periphery countries for financial control. According to his model, core countries extract cheap natural resources from periphery countries, ship those resources to semi-periphery countries for refining and manufacturing, and then send those finished goods to core countries for consumption. Because these finished goods are a more profitable part of the value-added supply chain, core countries maximize profit by selling those goods back to the periphery and semi-periphery countries. The cyclical relationship between core, semi-periphery, and periphery countries creates a system where periphery and semi-periphery countries are perpetually dependent on the finished products from core countries in order to survive. Cheap labor and raw materials provide increased profit margins for transnational corporations based in core countries. Throughout this process, semi-periphery countries remain in a state of limbo between resource exploitation and consumption. The world systems theory is largely based on the benefit of history and geography as a factor in core periphery dominance. Due to a series of geographical and historical events, Northwestern Europe was better situated in the 16th century to diversify its agricultural production. Early improvements in agriculture led to specialization and industrialization, giving Western Europe an early start on development. Mild climates and access to resources like coal created an opportunity for Europe to increase productivity and eventually industrialize. Access to oceanic travel and favorable currents also aided in the industrialization of Europe and the colonization of Latin America and Africa. Today, core countries primarily exist in mid-latitude coastal areas such as Western Europe, North America, East Asia, and Australia. There are disagreements among scholars as to where China fits in the world systems model, but it cannot be denied that China is a powerful country with imperial tendencies similar to that of Western Europe and the United States. While current geography plays a major role in the world economic system, Wallerstein primarily focused on historical economic growth in core countries as a key reason for economic domination. Core countries are able to use the financial power gained from early industrialization and large state mechanisms to ensure their dominance in perpetuity. According to Wallerstein, quote, "The key fact is that given slightly different starting points, the interests of various local groups converged in Northwest Europe, leading to the development of strong state mechanisms and diverged sharply in the peripheral areas, leading to very weak ones. Once we get a difference in the strength of the state machineries, we get the operation of unequal exchange which is enforced by strong states on weak ones, by..."
Okay, so the notion of a state is entirely superfluous to the theory. He just needs states to be like the thing that is categorized, which I think is a mistake, because you could simply use like that sort of nodal structure by itself. You don't need the notion of the state to facilitate that. I don't know how you're able to watch these kinds of videos on 1x speed, because that's how you listen to them carefully. I don't rush things like this. I'll rush debates sometimes because there's a lot of fluff, but like stuff like this where it's trying to be systematic, I need to process it carefully. Yeah, like there's interest here. It's just, it's not political science fundamentally. It's something else, and he's appending a lot of stuff to this as a scaffolding that he doesn't need. So, like, the theory of the state here is actual garbage, but the system that he's describing is not, right? Like, it seems a little bit basic, but... Man, I don't know, I listen to basically everything on 2x speed. If you want to listen to stuff on 2x speed, just read the book. Talks are generally just dumb by comparison. Yeah. I'm not super impressed by this, I'm not gonna lie. Like this part here, like this description, this is useful. It's not particularly groundbreaking, but it's useful. As an idea. Oh, well, I think we get the gist of this. Yeah, I think that's basically all of it, and then we just move into historical examples. That seems to be how this goes. I'm gonna subscribe to this guy, because I probably want to bring him on at some point, because he'd be interesting to talk to. His presentation seemed to be good. Is he still alive? What's he doing? Ethnic and traditional religions. Organic state theory. Oh, I really want to talk to this guy. Clash of Civilizations thesis. Okay, this guy actually would be interesting to talk to. And he, of course, doesn't have Twitter or anything. See, this is why these channels never take off. They don't know how to network. They just make the stuff and think it'll magically get out there. But you need to address your content to, like, stuff that people are talking about, which is one of the reasons why I engage in drama from time to time. Like, besides, like, with the Keffels nonsense, I actually did have, like, an issue with that personally that I was addressing. Same with the Mr. Girl stuff. But you also have to, like, address just generally things that people are talking about. If there's a debate going on, address the debate. Try to work in insights that are specific to you into that debate and try to be useful that way. That way, you're still doing your work, but then you're also getting some attention so people are actually hearing it. If you just make the videos and just leave them there, the algorithm is not going to plug good stuff over bad stuff. It's just going to, no one's going to hunt for it. A really good YouTuber that uses world systems is Piper Tompkins. Let's look up them. Piper Tompkins. Oh, and they're small, too. I like small channels because they'll talk to me. Oh, small world. Pogan and fellow traveler. Interesting. Oz and Dylan Burns. Oh, these must be debate reviews. Michael Parente, Hakim and Commodities. Demon Mama Supply Change in Twitter. But, like, look here. Like, you'll notice no thumbnails. Very sporadic. I mean, like, if they're not trying to grow, that's fine, but... Bozo versus... Oh, I just noticed it's Bozo versus Bozo. Oh, this is a review. Oh, were they reviewing the debate that was on my channel?
Got a group chat I'm in that seemed kind of interested in watching the stream, so.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. This is a series I've called Bozo Be Vozo, where me and some other people watch two stupid people debate. And today we're doing Pogan, who used to be, I guess, a Trotskyist until he lost a debate to Destiny.
I don't endorse any of this, by the way.
And now he's like, I guess, a market socialist. I don't know. This is just what I've been told. I'm not a follower of him. And then there's also he's debating fellow Traveler, who's a Maoist, on whether the Soviet Union was socialist.
Yep, that's my debate.
And since I'm writing about this topic for my book, I thought it would be a good thing to cover for this series. I guess. Were you gonna say something, Eric?
Yeah. I was gonna say, so your audience knows, you know, all of us because I was in the previous two Bozo v Bozos, you know.
I don't know if they know Aiden.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. Aiden, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello. I am Aiden, otherwise known as Kamikon. I use they them pronouns, and I'm here to laugh at bozos.
Oh, yeah.
Now
Hey, that's me. Oh my god.
just recently come back, and
Okay, let's see this thing.
Myself, I had to.
I want to see what they think of my intro.
You decided to
yourself you
punish
had to?
yourself.
Yes.
All right.
you might want to have to skip this.
Don't skip this. This is the best part.
Depends on how long is the intro. Go forward a bit.
Does anyone need any background on Pogan or anything?
Well, I don't know much about him, so you might as well.
Yeah, so he was kind of a rising political streamer or commentator kind of thing, and he's basically a market socialist, and he was around I think about a year ago, and he was kind of making some traction, but then kind of dropped off the face of the earth, and has now just recently come back and has tried to sort of build back up what he had before.
Hmm. Did he leave after he lost the debate to Destiny?
I don't know.
Okay. Fellow travel.
My understanding is he shut down his channel because he was doxxed and he was dealing with some external pressures. It wasn't anything so dramatic as this.
Traveler debated Vosh once, and it was pretty funny. I watched that. But yeah.
What
It was actually, I think, on the same issue. Also, goddammit ads.
if there were an app for happiness?
I
What if
would
you could
not
stream
download
joy?
it.
What if there
Whoa,
were
that
an
almost
app
actually
for
ran properly
happiness?
for once.
I wouldn't
so
download it.
Let's pull in our debaters very quickly.
Play-Doh.
There we are, and
Play-Doh.
let's center me,
Oh lord.
because that looks better. There we are. All right, welcome everyone to the Sunday Showdown. I am joined today by fellow traveler and Pokin to debate whether or not the USSR was
Finger
actually
gun.
socialist. Before we begin, if you
Yeah.
could please introduce yourselves. Pokin, you're new to the channel. If you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Hogan. I identify broadly as a socialist. The exact definition of what that means will obviously be hashed out here, hopefully. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/c/PoganVids. I upload essay-length content there about a variety of topics. I'm pretty famous or infamous, however you want to put it, for being critical of other leftist ideologies, most commonly Marxism-Leninism. Other topics that I've discussed include just socialism broadly, trans rights. I've discussed African American rights in the past. Lots of progressive topics, but definitely a focus on critique of other.
Reading there is a misreading of Marx. Marx and Engels treated communism as socialism as functionally the same thing. The dictatorship of the proletariat is not socialism. It's the social revolution. It's the process of the transformation of capitalist society into socialism.
Okay, whatever. We're not talking about this right now. Yeah, this is just like, if you just want to record your conversations with friends on YouTube, that's fine. But just this aesthetic is a disaster. Like, this is just bad. I wouldn't mind having them on though at some point. Somebody wants to let them know that I'm looking for panelists. I'm coming back in a week from now, so we'll be doing regular weekly panels again. And hell, we could discuss world systems theory in one of those. That'd be kind of interesting. But I think for the time being, I'm sort of satisfied. I'm not super impressed. I'm not gonna lie, it's frustrating. It's at least with Wallerstein's introductory book. Simplistic, very simplistic. Essentialist does a thing that I hate, and this loses it major points for me. Again, just uses an essentialized notion of Weber's definition of the state, which is not a definition of the state. President Sunday, I know this might be too nosy, but do you work part-time as well as YouTube? Very part-time. I used to work harder until like the last couple of months. I was working, I don't know what you'd call it, basically construction, but like deck and fence building, which is exhausting. But it was for my brother's company, and he recently put me on payroll, so I now don't have to leave my desk to work, which is a first for me for my entire life. But at the moment, it's just YouTube. And I'm going to level with you. Like, I love this job way more than I did that other thing. But it's harder. It's actually harder. Your brain never shuts off. You never rest. It's just constant. You're always thinking. Even when you're not streaming, you're just thinking about, okay, what am I doing next? How am I doing this? Da, 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 da. And you can see how indie this all is, right? Like, it's all very off the cuff, but I still have to find these things. I have to compile them. I have to think of topics. I have to do research in the meantime. Because I'm working on video essays as well. It's exhausting. It's very rewarding, but it's also exhausting. Like, good God. I said this already, but you should look into ecological and equal exchange. Okay. Yeah, just send me some stuff and I'll take a look at that. Yeah, it's fine to ask me about my work situation. I have a Patreon and everything, so that seems reasonable to ask. If you're going to support the channel, like what are the parameters of doing so? What's the need? Things like that. At present, I'm a little bit sort of financially safe, but like even taking like a couple weeks off, like the Patreon is so important because that's relatively stable. Like I'm looking at my YouTube revenue right now. When I'm really plugging, it ends up being close to 500, a little bit underneath per month. But like I take a week off, and not like a full week off. Like I come back occasionally, and it dips by half. Like YouTube does not pay well. If your interest is money, don't do it. But I like talking about this stuff, so this facilitates me having a lot of time to do so, and I've learned a lot from it. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do, and I recognize that because of the time, even for me, the audience is very small right now. So I'll have to make this announcement separately. What I'm kind of liking is partitioning the subject matter by streams and not doing the variety thing. So debate reviews, current events, occasionally drama stuff, like that kind of thing. And by drama, I literally just mean stuff pertaining to other streamers, things like that. Because sometimes that matters. Like, for example, like there was a recent debate between Rose Wrist, Destiny, and Nick Fuentes and Baked Alaska. If I wanted to cover that or do like meta commentary about like the parameters of the debate, what the debate itself being held maybe affects, like maybe as it bears on questions of like responsible platforming, yada yada yada. Like that's something I'll cover. I'm not going to weigh into like, oh my god, did Booksmarts get kicked out of his guest's house or something? Like that's the kind of thing that Chudlogic would do. I don't care about that kind of thing. But if it has like some political significance or some social significance, I'll talk about that. That's what I mean by drama. I don't otherwise engage in stuff like that. But that stuff during the day, during the regular office hours streams, as well as like the general chat, and maybe occasionally if it's pertinent to whatever I'm talking about, like theory readings. But then in the evening we'll do like the harder, like in the Midnight Oil streams, we'll do like the harder theory stuff, and we'll do like the deep dives and things like that. I like that because then people know what they're getting specifically when they tune in for either one, even if I don't specify the subject matter. Midnight Oil is for like this is when we nerd out. The afternoon, that's when that's the work day, right? Does that make sense? I might try doing that. It also means that I can regularly stream 4 hours a day without killing myself, because it's brutal. In addition, I suffer from allergies, so talking for extended periods of time is extremely hard. I can do it, it's hard, and it wipes me out really hard, so having that break means that the quality maintains. Do you ever plan on covering the subject of fascism? Of course. Of course, absolutely. I do so quite regularly, actually. In fact, that would be a good thing to do a deep dive in on sometime. Even if we wanted to do Gentili / Mussolini's Doctrine of Fascism, that would be interesting. I'm sure I can find some interesting readers on it. Marcuse on the relationship between Hegel and fascism, stuff like that. Like, it's broad, but will you keep the office hours one as well? Well, that's the point, yeah. So I'll do office hours during the day, probably like noon afternoon kind of thing, and then Midnight Oil at about, let's say, between 10:30 and 11 to whenever. Being's done a few videos going over the basics of comparative fascist studies. Well, that'd be interesting. If you can send me that stuff on Discord, I will consider covering that. Oh my god, my neck is killing me tonight. What the hell's going on? If you see me flexing constantly, just I have like a spasm going on back here. I have to replace this chair. Never cheap out on chairs. Nothing but that goes between you and the ground. Alright, well, it is midnight. So I think technically we're free to go. But yeah, that's probably how we're going to go with this going forward. It's going to be office hours during the day, midnight oil in the evening, probably about 5 times a week. And then I'll start. I don't know if I'll take weekends off or something, or if I'll just have, like, I'll just allow myself 2 days sort of as required kind of thing. But the goal is to have consistency. The trick with consistency, though, is that it forces you into like a cycle where you're now pushing stuff for, you're planning stuff around the cycle and not like doing stuff that you're really prepared to do, if that kind of makes sense. Are you going to go over perspective philosophy versus liquid Zulu? Of course. Perspective philosophy is just universally fun to cover because he's incoherent. Though as much as I don't like perspective philosophy, he almost surely knows more philosophy than liquid Zulu. High praise. I actually have a suspicion. See, the move liquid Zulu makes is he insists on an implication that nobody would actually maintain. But people are often too agreeable to point that out, so they'll run with it. And I have a deep suspicion that perspective philosophy didn't think to argue that, well, actually, engaging in argumentation doesn't actually imply that I prefer, as a general stance, to argue versus to inflict violence, or to seek truth, or whatever. Or that argumentation necessarily entails a seeking after truth, or any of that stuff. Any games you have your eye on? I have been playing Metroid Dread recently, and it's extremely good. As for games I have my eye on, I have a bunch of new computer parts, so I'll be able to run Elden Ring at some point, so that'll be something. There's not a whole lot out that's really interesting right now. I think what I want to play is Alien Isolation 2, but that doesn't exist. There's not a whole lot in the way of horror games coming out at the moment. In fact, let's actually see. Horror games 2022. Actually, what's Frictional doing right now? Oh, I haven't heard anything from them since Amnesia Rebirth, which was kind of a letdown, I'm not gonna lie. Let's see. Next Frictional game. No, they're still just advertising Rebirth. I think they've lost most of their staff since the first Amnesia. Oh. Frictional Games' next project is already in pre-production, and it's quote-unquote horror-ish, but it's definitely not a horror game. That's literally all I'm interested in you for, is your horror games. Horror-ish. They're moving into walking simulator territory. Amnesia Rebirth was a massive downgrade from Soma. Soma had tension and loneliness. Amnesia Rebirth, your main character wouldn't shut up, and there was very little actual environmental storytelling outside of the fort. And that might sound confusing. It's like, what do you mean no environmental storytelling? Like the environments are ambient. There's like stuff everywhere showing. Well, no. Generally, it was just, here's a spooky place and there's statues, and that's kind of it. Like with the fort, there's like an actual like discrete story there. Like who was present, what happened. They were barricading rooms. There was something in there with you. Like there's a story going on. But for most of it's just here's the spooky lab where they have the red stuff. Your Discord link doesn't seem to be working. The Discord link is... I'll update it. Here. I'll put it in the chat. Just follow this. Have you played Hollow Knight? I actually just bought Hollow Knight recently. I may play that soon. Because Sophie from Sinclair Lore, which is a very good channel, they do a lot of FromSoft game lore. And they're smart about it too. She's a sociologist, I believe. She was talking about how that's like one of the few Metroidvania games that she'll actually play and enjoy, so... Hollow Knight is incredible. Well, I will install that and I'll actually start playing it once I'm done Dread. Metroid Dread is so good. I just I beat Kraid this morning. I have a similar relationship with that game as I did with the first Souls game with Demon Souls. Because when I first bought that, I couldn't get past the first part of Boletaria Castle or Boletaria Palace, and I just gave up. I was frustrated for a few months, and then I dove back into it at one point. And I pushed through, and it became one of my favorite games of all time. Same with this one. Metroid Dread is just dripping with atmosphere, and it has some of the smoothest controls I've seen. It also incorporates elements from Alien Isolation, oddly enough, in certain parts of the game. And you think it was taking cues from Metroid Fusion, because there's similar, like, being chased by an undefeatable foe that you have to hide from, but not quite, because in that one it's literally just you run and then you go into an alcove and that's that. With this one it's like you actually have a persistent enemy that tracks you and goes through vents and things like that. You have to maneuver around it and hide. And it's actually tense. Are there kinds of games you don't like versus ones you do? I hate time waster games. Like, I have a lot of trouble getting into anything with, like, an extended opening where there's not, like, critical information being given to you. So, like, I find a lot of RPGs to be absolutely painful. Final Fantasy VII is a rare example where it's, like, everything is story-specific. And not just story-specific. The story is written intelligently and it's evocative of things, so it gets you into sort of like a thoughtful mode. By contrast, what else do we have here? I tried playing The Last Remnant. Oh my god, it's painful. It's actually painful. I'm pretty open-minded, though. But I think my favorite types of games are things... Spiritfarer is really good. I enjoyed that one. Stalker's good. Steins Gate is good. Sekiro's good, even if I don't enjoy it. I love the world, and I've just started to learn the combat for it. So, again, it's same deal as with Metroid Dread and with Demon Souls. I'll get into it eventually. It's just, like, internalizing the rules is hard. Have you played Return of the Obra Dinn? No, I haven't. I like the idea of games that, like, challenge you intellectually. I don't like the idea of games that require an extensive amount of time. Because for someone in my position, it's like, well, I would rather read and make headway on an actual problem. If that makes sense. But I know of Return of the Obra Dinn. It looks really interesting. I love the Myst games. Will you play any horror games on stream? I actually have. I played through all of Amnesia 1 and 2. And I have to return to finish Soma at some point, but I'm about halfway through that. I would love to do Alien Isolation at some point, because I think it's one of the best critiques. Not that it intends to be so, but just taking it by itself, it's one of the best critiques of the BioShock series as an attempt at political commentary that you can find. Why? Because it literally just... Sevastopol Station is just an airport. It's just a shopping mall. That's all it is. And it's identical in structure to Rapture, which is pretending to be a city. If you have the patience for jank, you should play the original Deus Ex. I tried. I can't get OBS to pick it up. I've tried really hard. OBS does not want to do it. Windows, my version of Windows doesn't want to run it properly. It's just bad. I've beaten the original Deus Ex. It's one of my favorite games. I played it on PS2 originally. Have you played Fallout New Vegas? Do you have any thoughts on it? Bethesda games are just broken and kind of lame. Fallout New Vegas, I played a bit of it. It seems way more interesting in terms of the ideas than the actual execution. President Sunday, how do I get access to videos that are not available when accessing your YouTube channel? I try to change location from US to Canada to... What do you mean, videos that aren't available when accessing your YouTube channel? I know my lights are off, thank you. What do you mean? I'm not sure I follow, Justin. Do you want to clarify? Do you like personal stories or more sociological stories? I don't necessarily think there's a strong distinction between them. You should play Hob. Hob's good. Let's take a look. Is it on Steam? Oh, they did Torchlight. Is this a 3D platformer? Huh. Oh, Shadow of the Colossus, of course. That one's fantastic. New Vegas is broken not because Bethesda made it, but because Bethesda put Obsidian on a tight deadline. No, it's not the, I'm not talking about the glitchiness. My issue with Bethesda games is that just because of the way the worlds of Bethesda games are just lifeless. You walk into a place and there's just people standing there. And that's it. And you talk to them, and they go, oh, you go over there with this, and you go over there with this. Here, there's a guy just standing there. Ah, it was all a trap. And then you kill the guy who was just standing there. And then you walk back. Here's the heirloom that was stolen by the guy who sent me to bring this thing to. He was a vampire. Oh no, buy the 9 divines. Here's some gold for your trouble. It's boring. Like, it's boring. And then they'll try to, like, have, like, epic battle scenes. Like, we've... I'm talking about Oblivion, of course, but it's the same thing goes for Fallout. Even Fallout has to do a lot of smoke and mirrors to pretend that there's, like, a large-scale conflict taking place. But at least they do that. Like, the part with Liberty Prime in Fallout 3 is cool, and it feels big. But I love how it's, like... You've got Sean Bean giving this epic battle speech. Like, we've summoned you from all of the realms to fight this cosmic evil. There's like 12 guys there. Oh, The Witness. I have The Witness. The Witness is hard. It's similar to the Talos principle in some ways, but a little less, like, specifically puzzly. Yeah, Deus Ex 1 was just fantastic across the board. I like Morrowind more than Oblivion or Skyrim, to be honest. I think a part of it is the, Actually, Morrowind's more dynamic than those games. And I like that there's not, like, a firm distinction between, like, inside a town and outside. Like, they're just in the overworld. There's no loading screens. Alright. It's midnight. We're gonna call it here. Have a good night, everyone, and I'll see you on the next stream. Probably tomorrow, because we're gonna try that new system where it's afternoon stream, midnight stream. Cool. I have played Undertale. And a matter of fact, I'm watching someone play Earthbound at the moment. Really good. You can't get past the Morrowind combat. Get past the Morrowind combat. The way it works is when you level up, the rate at which you hit increases to the point where it becomes functionally identical to Oblivion's combat. In fact, it gets easier. So. Why do we have a bunch of viewers all of a sudden? I'm about to sign off. What the hell, guys? Bunch of weirdos.